The sharp sting on my cheek was a physical shock, but the real impact wasn't on my skin. It was deeper, a shattering blow to the very core of my being, the absolute final insult in a decade-long saga of quiet sacrifices and unspoken promises. That single ugly sound in our opulent living room, the crack of his hand against my face, didn't just break the fragile piece of our perfect curated life, it detonated the illusion I had so carefully constructed. In that instant, amidst the ringing silence, I saw with blinding clarity the crumbling edifice of my marriage, the slow, insidious erosion of my identity, and the heart-wrenching distance growing between me and the child I had nurtured. There was no more denying the truth, no more hiding behind hope. My world, once a vibrant canvas of shared dreams, had become a desolate landscape, and I was standing in the ruins utterly alone. But something new ignited in that desolation, a flicker of defiance, a quiet whisper that this pain, this ultimate betrayal, would not be my end. It would be my beginning. Part 1. There are moments when the air itself feels wrong, when a subtle shift tells you everything you've built is about to crumble. It started as most betrayals do, subtly, a whisper of unfamiliar perfume clinging to a freshly laundered shirt, a fleeting glance from Daniel sharp and impatient when my questions lingered a moment too long. For 10 years, my life had been a carefully orchestrated symphony of his success. I'd poured my soul into creating the perfect home, raising our son, becoming the invisible architect of Daniel's burgeoning empire. We were the golden couple college sweethearts who defied the odds, building a life that glittered on the surface. I traded my own career, a career I loved, for the quiet satisfaction of being his anchor, his bedrock, and I never once regretted it. Not until the whispers began. First, it was the lipstick, a vibrant, audacious cherry red smudged ever so faintly on the collar of a white dress shirt he'd tossed into the hamper. It wasn't mine. My signature shade was a muted rose, a quiet confidence. This was a scream. My stomach clenched, a cold, hard knot forming in my gut. I told myself it was nothing, a client, a clumsy accident, but the image lodged itself in my mind, a tiny, irritating shard of glass. Then came the late nights. Just a big project, Liv. You know how it is. His voice, once warm and reassuring, had developed a clipped edge, a forced cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. He started coming home smelling of stale coffee and something else, something sweet and floral, not cloying like the lipstick, but fresh, youthful. It was the scent of possibility, of newness, and it clung to him like a second skin suffocating me. The silences between us grew longer, heavier, punctuated only by his distracted hums or my own forced attempts at conversation. I'd watch him across the dinner table, his eyes distant, his mind clearly somewhere, or with someone else. The cracks in our perfect facade were widening slowly, imperceptibly, but undeniably, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. Emotional cliffhanger. The next morning as Daniel hurried out, I found it, a small scarlet tube nestled deep beneath the passenger seat of his car. Part 2. You feel it in your bones, that chill of dread when the pieces of a terrible puzzle start to click into place, undeniable and devastating. The lipstick. It wasn't just a smudge on a collar anymore. It was a tangible, undeniable piece of evidence tucked away in the shadows of his gleaming luxury car. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the cool metal, a stark contrast to the burning heat in my chest. It was the exact same shade, that defiant cherry red. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a client. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was hers. I sat there for a long time, the engine off, the quiet hum of the city outside, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos in my head. A decade of devotion, of unquestioning trust, of building a life around this man. Was it all a lie? I started seeing her everywhere. Not literally, not yet, but in every subtle shift in Daniel's demeanor. His phone became an extension of his hand guarded face down on the table. Our intimate evenings, once filled with easy laughter and shared dreams, dissolved into him scrolling through emails claiming urgent work. When I finally confronted him, my voice a shaky whisper about the late nights, the growing distance, the lipstick, he exploded. Not a shout, not a roar, but a cold, venomous fury. Are you accusing me, Olivia? After everything I do for this family, you're being paranoid. You're suffocating me. His words cut deeper than any physical blow. They were designed to twist the knife, to make me doubt my own sanity, to blame myself. But I wasn't paranoid. Not anymore. The whispers from his colleagues started to trickle back to me, hushed tones, sympathetic glances. That new assistant, Sophie, she's very close with Daniel. Sophie, the name landed like a stone in my gut. A young, brilliant intern from our old university, now Daniel's personal assistant. My mind reeled. I remembered her a bright-eyed girl full of ambition. How naive I had been welcoming her, even offering advice. The thought twisted in my stomach a bitter bile. The air in our beautiful, expensive apartment, once so full of shared dreams, now felt heavy, with unspoken truths, with the stench of betrayal. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating in plain sight, and the man who was supposed to be my lifeguard was the one holding my head under the water. The fear was no longer about losing him, it was about losing myself. Emotional cliffhanger. The next day, I made a call, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hand, to a private investigator. The truth, however ugly, was now my only way out. Part 3. There's a particular kind of pain in knowing your worst fears are not just real, but far uglier than you imagined. The reports came back, thick envelopes, filled with cold, hard facts that sliced through my last vestiges of denial. Photographs, timestamps, locations. Daniel and Sophie late-night dinners, secluded coffee shops, hushed conversations in his car, and then the hotels. Multiple hotels. The dates, the times, the sheer audacity of it all burned into my retina. It wasn't just a fleeting affair. It was a brazen, ongoing saga unfolding right under my nose while I meticulously planned his meals and managed our son's schedule. The humiliation was a physical ache, a searing pain that radiated from my chest. It felt like my very foundation was cracking piece by agonizing piece. But the real gut punch came from Sophie herself. Before I could even process the investigator's findings, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I opened it, and there it was, a picture. Daniel and Sophie tangled together in a hotel bed, a cruel, mocking smile playing on her lips, a look of smug triumph in her eyes. It was a direct hit, a declaration of war. She wasn't just taking my husband, she was reveling in my pain. Suddenly, Sophie wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a presence in our home, under the guise of Daniel's special assistant, a constant chilling reminder of his betrayal. She'd be there when I picked up our son from school, a polite, unsettling smile on her face. She'd sit at our dinner table, offering unsolicited advice, her eyes subtly challenging mine. Daniel, meanwhile, acted as if nothing was amiss. His public displays of affection for Sophie, growing bolder, his indifference towards me a stark, cutting blade. I felt like a ghost in my own house, watching my life unravel, powerless to stop it. The air was thick with tension, a suffocating silence, punctuated by Sophie's chirpy anecdotes and Daniel's dismissive remarks. But the deepest cut, the most unbearable pain was yet to come. It was the moment my son, my sweet innocent boy, started to pull away. Emotional cliffhanger. One evening, after a particularly late night with Sophie, my son looked at me, his eyes devoid of warmth, and uttered words that shattered my soul. Mom, I'd be happier if Sophie were my mom. Part 4. The most agonizing betrayal isn't just from a lover, but from the ones you thought you could always count on, especially your own child. Those words, they echoed in the silence of our opulent home, a venomous whisper from the mouth of my own flesh and blood. Mom, I'd be happier if Sophie were my mom. My heart already bruised and battered, fractured into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't just the betrayal of a husband, it was the slow, insidious erosion of my bond with my son. He was only 10, and like most 10-year-olds, navigating the turbulent waters of pre-adolescence. He was starting to rebel, to push boundaries, to test limits, and Sophie, with her carefully crafted charm, exploited every single one of them. I was the strict mother, the one who insisted on healthy, balanced meals, who limited screen time, who understood his food allergies, and prevented him from eating things that would make him sick. I was the one who said no to soda and processed snacks, because I knew the consequences for his sensitive system. I was the one who prioritized his well-being, even when it meant being the bad guy. Sophie, on the other hand, was the fun one. She'd sneak him pizza and sugary sodas when Daniel was out. She'd take him to arcades late into the night, letting him stay up past his bedtime, filling his head with fantasies of freedom. She'd buy him the newest video games, allow him unlimited iPad time, and shower him with lavish gifts. To my son, she was the embodiment of indulgence, the carefree spirit who never said no. I was the old-fashioned one, the boring one, the mean one. He started rolling his eyes at my rules, turning away when I tried to explain his face, a mask of adolescent disdain. He started going to Sophie for comfort, for advice, for everything. I saw it happening, felt the icy grip of despair as my son, my little boy, drifted further and further away, manipulated by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a pawn in her game to replace me. The pain of Daniel's infidelity was immense, but the pain of losing my son, of seeing him turn against me in my own home, was a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I was losing everything, my marriage, my identity, and now the most precious bond of all. The walls of my carefully constructed world were crumbling, and I was trapped inside watching it all fall apart. The desperation was a raw, aching wound, and I knew with every fiber of my being that something had to give. I was at my breaking point, stretched taut, fraying at the edges. Emotional cliffhanger. The tension in the house was a palpable entity, a silent scream building between Daniel and me, ready to erupt into a storm that would change everything. Part 5. There's a moment, a flash of pure clarity amidst the chaos, when you realize the only way to save yourself is to walk away. The storm finally broke over dinner. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. Daniel was advocating for another late night for our son, a trip to an amusement park with Sophie, and him dismissing my concerns about his allergies, his bedtime, his need for routine. My carefully constructed calmness snapped. All the years of silent sacrifice, the endless emotional labor, the gut-wrenching pain of his betrayal, the agonizing loss of my son's affection, it all coalesced into a furious guttural cry. "You are destroying him, Daniel. You are letting her poison his mind, and you are destroying us." My voice was raw, unfamiliar, laced with years of suppressed rage and hurt. Daniel's face contorted a mask of cold fury. "You are hysterical, Olivia. You are the problem. You are suffocating everyone with your rules and your paranoia." The argument escalated, words hurled like sharpened knives, each one drawing blood. The living room, once a sanctuary, felt like a battleground. And then he did it. Mid-sentence, as I stood there, tears streaming down my face, begging him to see, to understand, he raised his hand. And he slapped me. The sound echoed through the opulent space, a sharp, sickening crack. My head snapped back, the sting on my cheek immediate, but it was the humiliation, the sheer, utter disbelief that truly paralyzed me. My world tilted. The tears stopped, replaced by a chilling clarity. I stood there utterly still, watching him, his chest heaving, his face red with rage, and I knew. Enough. The word resonated in my mind not as a whisper, but as a booming declaration. Enough. This is over. In that moment, everything snapped into focus. The years of sacrificing my dreams, my identity, my career for his. The emotional toll of being his silent support, the agony of watching him betray me, the heartbreaking distance from my son. And now, this final ultimate insult. It wasn't just a slap. It was the final nail in the coffin of a marriage that had already died 1,000 deaths. That night, even as the sting lingered on my cheek, my mind was sharper, clearer than it had been in years. I calmly packed a small bag, making sure to include a few sentimental items. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I hadn't touched in ages, and sent an email to a lawyer, a simple, concise message: "I need to file for divorce immediately." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, painful conversations, and the agonizing process of separating our lives. I fought for my son, for visitation rights, for what was fair, but I also knew I needed to step back, to give him space to understand, to grieve, to process, without the constant tension of our crumbling marriage. It broke my heart, but I made the difficult decision to temporarily cede primary custody, ensuring I would have consistent, protected time with him. I knew this was a battle for his future, and sometimes a retreat is the bravest advance. I was taking control, not fighting to stay, but fighting to leave, and as soon as the papers were signed, I booked a one-way ticket to Italy. The place I'd always dreamed of, a place where I could breathe again, a place where I could find myself entirely apart from him. The echo in the silence. Daniel eventually married Sophie. Their wedding photos, plastered across social media, were a stark reminder of the life I had left behind. But the universe, in its own mysterious way, has a peculiar sense of poetic justice. Life with Sophie, as it turned out, wasn't the carefree paradise my son had envisioned. Daniel, who had never truly learned to care for anyone but himself, proved incapable of handling our son's complex food allergies. There were scares, terrifying emergency room visits, and the harsh realization that, Fun didn't always equate to safe. Sophie, for all her charm, wilted under the mundane pressures of daily life, unable to manage a household or Daniel's increasingly demanding schedule. He developed chronic stomach issues, a constant companion to his stress, and Sophie, the special assistant, found herself overwhelmed, unable to cope with the reality of a marriage that lacked the quiet strength and unwavering support I had once provided. Slowly, subtly, my son started to see. He'd call me small voice hesitant, asking about his favorite healthy snacks, about my old routines. He'd tell me about Sophie's impatience, Daniel's growing frustration. He began to understand the quiet sacrifices, the invisible labor, the unconditional love that had once defined our home. He saw the difference stark and undeniable. But by then, I was no longer waiting. I was living. In a sun-drenched studio in Italy, the scent of olive groves and fresh paint filling my days, I reconnected with old friends, traveled to charming villages, and poured my soul onto canvases, each brushstroke a testament to my newfound freedom. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I was Olivia, the woman who had dared to walk away, who had chosen herself. They chose to lose me. I chose to find myself. And the truth is, sometimes that painful moment, that final breaking point, isn't an ending. It's the most powerful beginning you could ever imagine. A slap can sting, but sometimes it's the very force needed to shake you awake, to remind you that your worth is non-negotiable and your life is yours to reclaim. Hey everyone, it's Olivia from Midnight on Reddit. This journey, it's been a lot. And I know so many of you out there have faced your own turning points, those moments where you knew deep down you had to choose yourself. What was your enough is enough moment? What was the moment that made you realize you had to walk away to find your own strength? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all reflect, heal, and empower each other.